into questions, we wanted to start with kind of an overview of SEO and basically what all it entails and some of the basic components for you that may be less familiar. So basically, search engine optimization are tactics that you use to help your website perform well in search. And there's really usually three key components to that. There are the technical elements of SEO, which focuses more on the backside of your site, those back-end components like the code or site speed. We then look at off-page signals, which is really heavily to do with your content. And then last is off-page signals, which is more related to link building, Google My Business, those external factors. So with that, we will dive right into our questions.
All right. So the first question that we wanted to go over is, if you're limited on time and you can only spend, you only have a little bit of time to spend optimizing, what are the things you would do to make the most impact? Kind of slaughtered the question there. Sorry. So this is a pretty common question around, resources and what your bandwidth is, your capacity, and where to make the things count. Personally, I think you should focus initially on the technical SEO. So that kind of goes into the first foundation that Lindsay talked about, which is doing things on kind of the code side of your site to make sure it's ready to be indexed. So I like to think of it kind of like if you're having a dinner party. So technical SEO is things like having a house and having a table and having silverware and dishes. On-page SEO is kind of the food that you're going to be serving, and then off-page SEO is how you get the invites out to bring people over. So before you really order food and invite people over, you have to make sure that they have somewhere to sit, somewhere to eat, and that's kind of where that technical SEO comes in. So making sure that the important pages don't have no indexes on them, making sure you have metadata for all your pages, making sure that you have page titles, friendly URLs, all that stuff that kind of goes into making the page worth indexing and then findable.
Agreed. Okay, so another question we had was, does having an SSL certified site help with SEO? Short answer here is yes. For those of you that are unfamiliar with what SSL means, SSL stands for Secure Sockets Layer. And basically, it's a global standard security technology that decreases the risk of sensitive information being stolen or tampered with. So in the healthcare industry, that's information around, your PHI, credit cards, passwords, things like that. Sites that are secure begin with HTTPS, and sites that are not begin with just HTTP. So why does that matter for SEO? Well, frankly, because Google said so. In 2015, Google stated that their HTTPS ranking may actually serve as a tiebreaker in terms of those ranking signals that Google evaluates when they look at different websites. So if your website is equal to your competitors in terms of a lot of those other ranking factors, things like page speed, title tags, content, things like that. So if you're kind of neck and neck with your competitor, if their site is secure and yours is not, your competitor is going to rank ahead of you. Their blog, actually, their webmaster blog had also hinted at a fully secure web in the future. So they said, as migrating to HTTPS becomes much easier over time, they're going to continue to work towards a completely secure web by default. And then additionally, just from a user experience perspective, I know a lot of us use Chrome, and that there are browsers, especially Chrome, and I think some others as well, where if a user goes to a non-secure site, they're actually going to throw up a warning, letting those users know that it's not a secure site. So much more likely to have users bounce from there.
Yeah, it's certainly becoming more and more important over time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the warning they throw up when it's not secure is really bold, and it basically says don't trust this site. So, I mean, if it's something where you want people to give you any sort of information, Google is basically telling them not to.
Yep. All right, our next question. This one was actually, we were kind of lumping several questions that we got together. So we did have multiple questions that were related to this topic. So we did kind of we're going to address all of that with just this one slide here. The question is, how do you find the most applicable keywords to target? And what tools do you recommend? So I am going to kind of do a run through of a really quick keyword research process and how that works. and some of the different tools that we like to use in order to do that. So the first step to finding the most applicable keywords is really you just need to gather a giant keyword list. And so the first step is going to be, I usually just open a spreadsheet and gather all of the keywords that you can think of. I like to look through your competitor content. I like to see other sites that are ranking well for those keywords that are kind of related to your topic. Even browsing sites like forums or Reddit are really great sources to see how people are talking about the different topics that you're trying to write about. From there's also keyword tools that can help you to generate keyword ideas. Some of the most popular are Google's Keyword Finder. I like to use Moz Keyword Explorer because they have different options for finding even broader ideas beyond just that keyword that you are searching. SEMrush is another great tool. Answer the Public is a free website that you can use to find questions. And then there's a browser extension called Keywords Everywhere, which is also really great for keyword research. So once you have that giant keyword list, we then want to narrow that list down because obviously this giant keyword list is just a list of ideas. It doesn't mean that this is exactly what people are searching for, and it doesn't tell you how often they're searching for it. So you want to narrow it down by volume to see kind of what are the most popular variations that people search for, and then cut out those keywords that don't have any searches. After that, I like to evaluate difficulty, and this is the most important step that I think a lot of people skip. And this is important, especially in healthcare, because for certain types of keywords, Google really prioritizes authority sites, and that is going to be extremely hard to rank for. So kind of see who you're competing against in search results for some of those keywords. If it's a lot of high authority sites like .edu domains, .gov sites, WebMDs, that is going to be extremely difficult. And so I would probably prioritize more of those local searches. Those tend to be a lot of provider terms, a lot of searches for local services or locations. And the bonus for those kinds of searches is that they tend to be very bottom of the funnel searches. So you're going to get users who are more likely to convert than those users who are looking more for kind of high funnel conditions and signs and symptoms, those kinds of keywords. So that's my long spiel on keyword research and some of the different tools. I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts you'd like to share.
Yeah, I think when you dive into like keywords, it's important to understand kind of where at in that funnel that Lindsay talked about you're trying to target, because Google shifting more towards that machine learning and AI and getting into learning about user intent, that's going to kind of dictate the way you write about it, because they're going to search differently if they're looking for somebody to kind of perform that sort of treatment now versus just doing research on what that treatment entails. So putting that into your strategy when you start to look at these keywords is going to help a lot. Yeah, that's everything else.
Another thing I just want to recommend here quick is if you really want to evaluate conversion potential for some of your keywords, the best way to do that is to run a PPC campaign and use those keywords on Exact Match and see exactly how well those keywords convert. Run that campaign for a couple months to get enough data, and then once you feel like you have a good handle on what keywords convert the best, target those keywords for your SEO. And that is the best way to really understand the full picture of what's going to drive revenue.
Hey, guys, I had a question on that. So if somebody's new to I don't know, they're just starting out with Keyword Explorer. I know you mentioned one of the tools there was free, but are there others there that are free or maybe more beginner friendly that somebody could use from that list that you mentioned, Lindsay? Or is there one that jumps out more that's more advanced? Any insight there?
Yeah. So a lot that I mentioned are actually paid tools. Moz is a paid tool. SEMrush is paid. Keyword Finder or Keyword Explorer Planner, sorry. Google Ads, that one is free. So that's the first place I would recommend going. There's one called KW Finder. That lets you perform a handful of searches before it locks you down and makes you do a paid search. I think you can perform a handful like every day or something. Google Search Console is also a great one to look at existing keywords that are driving traffic to your site, it doesn't really give you additional ideas beyond how your content is already performing, but it's a great idea to see where you're at today and see where you need to maybe branch off from there.
Keywords Everywhere is free too. I like that one a lot. You have a couple different options with it. If you go to a competitor page that you think does a really good job with that certain service line or topic or whatever, you can right click on it after you add the extension and click Analyze this page, and it'll pull out every single keyword on that page, give you volume estimates, competition estimates, and then beyond that, if you do a Google search for something, so like bariatric surgery, you're going to see it on the sidebar. That extension is going to filter in a bunch of other keywords like, hey, this is kind of related. You might be interested in this keyword. So when you're doing that, compiling the list type of thing, Keywords Everywhere is probably my favorite tool, and it's free.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Our next question, we got a couple variations of this question as well. When writing about a condition or treatment, is it better to have one page with more content or to have multiple pages with thinner content? As you can probably guess, it's not a cut and dry answer. It really depends on the service line. So rather than focusing on the number of pages, I think it's important to focus on the different types of intent someone would have if they're coming to that page. I think ideally you should be able to tell a pretty comprehensive story on one page rather than trying to chunk it out into multiple pages, unless you have a strategy behind doing so. But there's different ways you can fit a lot of that information onto your page with subheads and bulleted lists, and just making sure that you're writing for the user and their intent. If you think of different conditions and treatments, consider how much information you would need for answering someone's questions about cancer versus ear infection. There's going to be a more robust information on cancer that you'd want to probably break out into more pages. So that's where that keyword research can come in to see what users are searching for most. Our content strategists look at your organizational goals and user behavior to kind of connect that related content across the site.
One thing I will say is if you are really wanting to target a specific keyword for SEO, you want to make sure that that keyword is going to be within your page title, within your heading. And so that's where, if it does make sense to have multiple pages, it can be beneficial from an SEO perspective to be able to target a lot of those different topics with different pages, because you have you can use that H1 space in that page title within each page to effectively target each keyword. So if it makes sense from both a user behavior and user intent perspective and an SEO perspective, then I say break them out. Otherwise, one robust page can also serve a really good purpose.
All right, so kind of along the lines of the keywords, what's the right balance between incorporating keywords in your content and keyword stuffing? Kind of the general rule of thumb is if you wouldn't say those words in that order out loud to somebody, it's probably not going to work on the page either. Obviously, it's a little more in depth than that, but basically doing your keyword research, doing all the steps that Lindsay talked about to make sure that it's a really quality keyword, really quality phrase, it's matching the user intent that you're trying to target. It's going to come out a lot more conversational anyways, because that's the way people are searching now, is really conversationally. So this should happen naturally. Keyword stuffing is kind of gone for the most part. It's, some people still do it. Google is really good about catching it. But as you read through your content, if it's difficult to read through because it just doesn't kind of flow the way you would naturally read, that's usually a pretty good indicator that you're keyword stuffing. It's kind of simple to me, but the balance between the two would just be that if you feel like you have to keyword stuff, then you probably didn't do a lot of those steps on the keyword research side, and you're probably stuffing a lot of keywords that don't have a lot of value to them anyways. So just focus on the research part, and then your content will be easier to put together.
Yeah, because I think we recommend optimizing pages for one, maybe two keywords. Much more than that, it might be worthwhile breaking it out into separate pages.
Mm-hmm. All right. What are your thoughts on using newer Google My Business features like Q&As, posts, and their impact on search results rank? I think these are great features that Google has come out with for business listings, the Q&A portion and then the Google posts. I would say for business listings, you want to make sure that you have a strong foundation first before you're focusing on these other features, as nice as they are, but making sure your listing is accurate with the name, address, phone number, the correct category, the correct hours, and that you have photos on your listings as well. That's one of the most powerful local SEO strategies to improve your local search rankings. And for the Q&As and posts, when people are interacting with your listing, that can increase your rankings naturally. The behavioral signals of the click-through rate on your listings is a ranking factor for Google. And another thing to keep in mind is that while your listing does impact your website's ranking, 63% of mobile searches nowadays are those zero-click searches. So users are really looking at your listing to find the information they need. So they might not always be clicking to your website, but making sure that those listings are accurate and as built out as possible is really important. And then you can optimize even further with answering those questions that users are asking and making sure that you're the source of truth for those questions. Anyone can go into your listing and answer a question that a user is asking. So you want to be proactive in providing the right information. And if someone's asking where to park on your listing, you'd want to be the person to answer that rather than having some random person answer. And then with Google Posts, I think Google has been experimenting a lot within the last year or so with what they're doing with posts. I think it's a great opportunity to use on some of your priority locations, and it gives the users another call to action, and it provides a photo to them so it can really catch their eye on your listing. Yeah.
Kind of related to the Q&As, one tactic I've seen some organizations do is rather than just relying on users to submit questions, they will submit their own questions and answer them. So kind of making their own FAQ section in their business listings. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that can then outweigh and outrank, so to speak, some of the crazier questions that tend to pop up from people who are submitting those. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, this is the one that I feel like we get a lot with our clients. How do you work with your providers to optimize your web content? Sometimes it feels like you're speaking completely different languages. They talk in health terms that you don't really know, and then y'all talk in digital terms that they've probably never heard of. So I think the best solution here is really to do just that, is to work with the providers. Health literacy varies pretty greatly between audiences, especially in areas, it doesn't matter how educated the area is, health literacy is something that is completely different. You can have somebody who's, got very high education levels, but when they're confronted with an illness or they're scared or something like that, health literacy is a very different animal. So I would recommend working with those providers to kind of explain that those technical terms are not patient-friendly, and asking them to explain those terms with a larger audience in mind. If possible, even presenting them with some of that keyword research to show the data that around what users in your area are actually searching for. That can be extremely helpful, especially if you have those providers where they're looking for more data-driven decisions. Mm-hmm. And then also you can hit them with the statistic that only about 12% of the US adults are proficient in health literacy. It should also be noted here that 11% of US adults actually work in healthcare. So that's a significant amount of people that are not exactly health literacy proficient. I think it also might help on the flip side for you all to explain why you might need to address these larger audiences. So the providers probably don't really know or even maybe care much about what SEO is. So explaining it to them in terms that they can appreciate. So if more users are able to understand your content, then they're probably going to feel more comfortable coming to you for care. Healthcare is strikingly similar to retail. Consumerism is really tough when the understanding of the product is limited. So that definitely applies to healthcare here as well. And then I think that type of logic can also be linked back to your overall business or department objectives for kind of a more compelling argument to get everybody on the same page.
Well said.
All right, how can we make an average person feel more comfortable in their search? I think this kind of goes hand in hand with what Lauren just talked about with always write for the average user and make your content user focused. Pay attention to the health literacy levels within your area and making sure you're meeting those needs of those users. And just remembering that not everyone knows some of the medical terms that we're so used to using on a daily basis. So that's where that keyword research, again, can come in handy. And another way, I think, is just making sure you're providing a call to action on the page that you're bringing the user to once they do find you in search, so that whatever page they do happen to land on, you're making it easy for them to take the next step and really feel like they don't have to jump around your site, but you're kind of leading the way for them.
Okay, our next question is, do you have any tips for doing SEO at scale? We have more than 14,000 pages with constantly changing content. So this is a really tricky question because SEO entails so much. And so if you have a really large organization and a really large site that is always changing, I think your first step is really to get a handle on your internal processes and creating an SEO governance plan before you jump into buying a tool or investing in a lot of SEO upfront. You really need to understand who all is touching your site, who all is writing your content, who's going into your CMS and publishing pages or documents, who is involved in the back-end technical aspects that really have a big impact on SEO. And then you need to develop a governance plan. Otherwise, without that plan, often you'll find that as you are making forward progress in SEO, things are getting kind of messed up faster than you can fix it. So you really need to get a governance plan and get everyone internally on the same page so you're able to make forward progress once you do have that plan in place. It can be really helpful if you're a large organization to have an SEO point person on your team who is kind of that bridge between these different areas and can oversee all of these different touch points that people have with your site. And as far as that governance plan, it can really be as simple as a checklist that people use whenever people are publishing new content on your site. It might include items like a formula for writing page titles for your organization, or instructions on when to implement redirects, or even specifics about your CMS and different components that can affect SEO if people are unfamiliar with certain components. For example, there's often a checkbox in the back end of your CMS that will prevent a page from being indexed in search. So if you have people publishing content that don't really know what that impact is, that can be a severe impact. So having that kind of guidance and that governance plan and checklist in place can really help. After that, I would probably start by implementing some kind of tool or process to regularly crawl your site so you can get that technical foundation in place and stay on top of that. Because as Tim was saying earlier, that technical foundation is kind of like the dinner party example, where if you don't have that house or that dinner table in place, you can't really have that dinner party at all. So getting your technical foundation, regularly crawling your site, checking for those issues and staying on top of 404s, no index tags, redirect issues. And then really, as a third step, I would recommend conducting an audit of your site to really create that roadmap and long-term strategy for your team. So this is where pulling in an agency can be really helpful to conduct that audit of your site. Having someone to kind of have those outside viewpoint that has a lot of experience can be helpful in crafting that roadmap and knowing what is going to really make the most impact and help you long term. So when you're making that roadmap, I would really recommend focusing on things that are going to offer the most value with the least amount of effort required. And so kind of prioritizing it that way, and also considering your organizational goals and your kind of marketing strategy as well. So that's my spiel.
For something of that size, how often do you think we should recommend that they do crawl their site for some of that technical stuff?
So I usually recommend about every week if you can. If you can set up alerts, you can get a weekly email that is kind of a rundown of different issues that may have come up. It really depends, though, on how often you're changing your site, if you're making updates every week. Otherwise, you could maybe push it back to a monthly update or a monthly crawl. It really just depends on how often you're changing your site.
Makes sense.
Yeah, one of the things kind of with constantly changing content, it's kind of easy to do the SEO if you're constantly making those changes. If you do some of the other stuff that's been talked about, like the keyword research, you do some of that legwork up front before you put it on the site, you're kind of doing SEO at scale that way. And then the other benefit with constantly changing your content is Google crawls sites that change a lot and get a lot of traffic more frequently than sites that don't change a lot and don't get a lot of traffic. So New York Times, for example, CNN, those big news sites, they get crawled multiple times, in a minute. Google's constantly pretty much lives on their site to see the most recent up-to-date information. That's why when you do a Google search and you get those news results, they're minutes old because they're getting crawled frequently. So you're going to probably get crawled a lot too if you have that many pages that are constantly changing. So your SEO initiatives will take hold a lot quicker as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, is schema markup effective in moving search results? So really briefly what schema is, I like to think of it like the old Rolodex, where you would have a bunch of information about a person on a card, and then you would just have a bunch of those cards. So each of the pages on your site can have some sort of markup that basically tells Google what that page is, what the type of information they're trying to convey is, and how to read, organize, and index that information. So it's just putting it on the back end in a way that Google can understand. So alone, if you just do schema and that's the only kind of SEO tactic you do, it's probably not going to move the needle a whole lot. But as a part of a bigger strategy, it's a really good tactic because it's going to have a lot of impact on the way things are distributed. If you have ratings and reviews on your providers, schema is the way that you pull that into the Google search results. So if you see search results that have stars on them organically, that's how that's being done. So having that incorporated within your larger SEO strategy is really important. And then beyond that, as far as anything local, pulling into some of those kind of rich data fields, things like that are getting more and more prevalent, schema is a really effective way to do that as well. So I think it's definitely worth it as long as it's part of a bigger strategy.
And I think long-term schema is something that will become more and more important. I know Google is continually pushing websites to adopt schema and creating more and more features. And I really see schema markup today as kind of yet being in its infancy. I think over time it's going to become even more and more of a necessary component. So kind of getting a handle on it now can be really beneficial and pay off even more so in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, next question here is, do you feel business listing services are worth investing in after you've claimed and optimized the top 5 or so properties? So my answer here is yes, it's always going to be valuable. I would say once you have those first top 5 or so claimed and optimized, your strategy is shifting a little bit more from user experience to more of an SEO benefit. The more that you have your name, address, and phone number, or also known as a citation, present on more and more sites, the more authority your website is going to have over time, and also the more links you're going to acquire from those outside directory sites. So kind of part of that overall external SEO strategy. But you would be surprised, even beyond claiming those top 5, how many organizations still get phone calls and feedback from patients saying that I found this random phone number, that's the wrong phone number, I tried to contact you, and it can be on these random directory sites and people still tend to find them. So the more that you can branch out and really invest time in optimizing those other directory sites, it can pay off. The other aspect is if you look at the local search ecosystem, there's a really great graphic out there by White Spark I suggest looking that up. You can see how often a lot of these directory sites are connected to each other, and they actually feed data to other sites. So it can actually pay off in the long term if you are investing time in these other sites, like Foursquare, for example. You're going to have that payoff because it is going to feed those other websites as well. So I would say I would consider it if you really want that SEO benefit, if you have patient feedback still, even after you've optimized those top 5 sites, that you're still getting those phone calls that patients are struggling. And another big factor could be if you have undertaken a name change recently or in the past 10 years even, that data is still going to be lingering out there and floating around. And I would especially consider it if you have other names for your locations out there.
One other thing, so I don't know if anybody caught it, Kelly briefly mentioned it on another GMB slide, but 63% of all Google searches are zero-click or no-click searches. That means that the user's question or intent or what they're looking for was solved on the search result page, and they didn't have to leave Google. And a huge chunk of that is Google My Business. So anymore, it's not that Google My Business should be a part of your strategy. Maybe you should dedicate some time or resources. It's to a point now and will increasingly be in the future where it needs to be its own strategy. It's huge. It's local. It's massive. Google is doing everything in their power to make people stay on the search engine and not go to your website. And so if you don't have this strategy, you're missing out on 63% of searches. That's a huge percentage. When you pull that out into revenue, I mean, you can't ignore it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Next question was, with the name change to your healthcare organization, what key things should you be aware of and do or not do as it relates to SEO? There's a lot of things to consider when you're going through a name change with your organization, obviously. I think with SEO, the one with the biggest immediate impact is ensuring that you have the correct redirect set up on your site for all of your relevant pages. If you're not transferring that link equity, then you're basically starting over from scratch with your new domain. Another thing you want to do is inform Google and Bing about your domain change and your name change through Search Console and Bing Webmaster Tools, and then submit your new sitemap to them so they're able to crawl your site. Focus on your metadata, your page titles and meta descriptions that are on your site to make sure that you're incorporating your new name and referencing that. And then, as Lindsay kind of touched on, that off-page SEO, make sure you're changing your brand name and your URL and your descriptions across all of those external sites, like Google My Business and even your social media platforms, making sure that those are all changed with the correct URL. Yeah, I would say those are the top things that you should consider.
If you're setting up redirects correctly, if people are searching for your old name, your new site should come up just because Google will make that correlation. But it doesn't hurt to run a paid search campaign for some time just to get people used to the idea of your new name as they're searching. That can be a beneficial kind of add-on as well.
And by correctly on redirects, so there's a lot of different ways to do redirects. There's 301s, 302s, 307s. 301s are the only ones that are permanent. So that's you telling Google and the other robots out there that this page forever lives at this new URL. It's never going to go back to the other one. 302s, 307s, those are temporary. So you're saying it's forward it for now, but eventually I'm going to come back. So the impact of doing that incorrectly could be what Lindsay said, where your new page doesn't really get that equity to show up in the search engines. And then beyond that, when people go to that page that is being redirected, so the old name, you're not passing along the authority from that traffic. It'll only put about half at most over to the new page, whereas a 301, the permanent redirect, will shift usually around 97 to 99% of that equity, which adds up.
Yeah.
So you guys mentioned on that slide Bing, and I realized been talking a lot about Google, and don't forget about my boys at Bing, boys and girls at Bing. What do you have for updates on numbers as far as how does search traffic split between Google and Bing? Do you have like kind of updated numbers on, are more people using Bing now compared to in the past, or is it still pretty far behind? How does it compare to Google?
Everybody's still pretty far behind Google. Their market share is pretty huge, and a lot of the tactics carry over across them. So even though we say Google, it works across the board, and you don't have to do a whole lot different. Bing hasn't really gained any market share recently overall, at least not a shift worth mentioning. That other Baidu or whatever that one is, that Baidu search engine has actually made the biggest shift. Still nowhere that Google's concerned about, but
which Baidu is a Chinese search engine, so we probably won't need to worry about that too much.
Yeah, to answer your question, Google still runs it and will continue to.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody's favorite question. What strategies do you recommend regarding SEO for voice discovery? So I think when it comes down to it, if you're employing the strategies that you would for normal search engine discovery, it's also going to help in terms of voice discovery. A lot of the issue here is we don't currently have the data around voice search to really be optimizing much further than we already do for your search engine results pages. The data just doesn't exist yet. However, following the strategy where you're optimizing for the user is always going to help with rankings. And I think that's especially true for voice discovery. Your voice devices don't care about your organization. They care about their end user. So you just want to make sure that you're always optimizing for them. That said, if I were to give a strategy, I would definitely say focus on those local listings. Many of the voice devices end up pulling from the business listing information. So the Google, Bing, Yelp, those types of platforms. So my advice would be to create, claim, and optimize those local listings as much as possible. Anything to add, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Lauren said. I don't think voice is there as a thing yet. I think it's dramatically misrepresented and mixed in with voice assistance, which is a very different thing. When my daughter asks Alexa all the time, is it going to rain tomorrow? That sort of information is not useful for the SEO spectrum, at least not in healthcare. But when they pull these studies to talk about how big voice search is, they include that sort of data, and it skews the data. There's a couple really nice surveys out there that they've done around voice, and there's questions within that survey that are really specific to voice search. And if you look at just those and rule out all the voice assistants, voice search is actually down year over year. So less people are using it than they were last year. That's not to say it's not going to blow up at some point, but there's a lot bigger things that are going to have, ROI right now around SEO that you can do and that I would recommend focusing on. And a lot of those, like Lauren's talking about with local listings, Schema, trying to get into those featured snippets and those knowledge panels, things like that, are going to be the same stuff that plays in the voice. So once that does get here, if it ever gets here, you'll naturally be ready.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next question is, should you track search engine rankings of specific keywords using third-party tools? This is one that we actually have several differing perspectives on, and you'll actually find that a lot in the SEO space is the answers aren't always cut and dry. It's not just black and white. There's a lot of gray. There's a lot of different approaches to achieving things. So you may hear several different perspectives today, but I'll give mine first. So tracking rankings can be beneficial to help gauge the effectiveness of your SEO efforts. But I really strongly feel that if keyword rankings is the only metric that you're using to gauge success, you're really doing yourself a disservice. And that's because I consider keyword rankings to be a vanity metric, meaning that it looks good, it makes you feel good to see yourself ranking up there. But at the end of the day, is it really driving your organization revenue? And that's what's hard about measuring success only using rankings, is that the gap between ranking for a keyword and getting revenue is so wide. So that's why, let's say you're ranking number 1 for Crohn's disease symptoms. But is that keyword actually driving traffic to your site? And is that traffic actually converting and bringing you revenue? So that's why when I am undertaking an SEO strategy, I really like to look a step lower and look at organic traffic and look at conversions from that organic traffic, because ultimately that is what's going to bring you success. So that's kind of my soapbox. Feel free to share.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add on to that. I think if you're looking at one metric and have that be your only metric in any situation, whether that's rankings or anything else, I think that that's definitely doing yourself a disservice. It's always good to take things into context with the rest of those other key metrics and KPIs to look at as well.
Yeah, I think it's one piece of a very larger puzzle that you should look at when you're measuring success. And like Lindsay mentioned, what's actually getting conversions on your site? Is it because you're ranking first, or is it because of your keywords, or there's a lot of different factors?
Yeah, if you start a question with should I track, I don't have to read the rest. My answer is always yes. I just love data. I love having all of it, but fully on the same page as everybody else here. If that's the only thing you're focusing on, you're not going to have real success with that. You're not going to be able to turn that into something actionable. And I think I agree, it's kind of a vanity. On the surface, it's a vanity metric. And by definition, vanity metrics aren't actionable. And so why pay attention to them? The one thing I will say why I like to track keyword rankings as part of a different strategy, not by itself, is because there's documented differences in click-through rates between the 10th position and the first position. There's a huge difference in, how much volume and traffic you're really going to get based on positions on the page. So if we assume that your website is perfect, your conversion funnels are in working order, you don't have constraints, your content's really good, everything else on the page is really great, being in the 4th position and the 1st position can be a difference in revenue in the millions, theoretically. So I think it's important, but yeah, if it's the only thing you're looking at, you're not going to get anything out of it.
The thing I also struggle with as far as rankings is when you're tracking a single keyword, you're really trying to distill all these thousands of ways that people search into one single keyword. And rankings are going to vary so much by a user's specific location, their browsing history, their device. And so it's really hard to say, I am ranking number 1 for this one keyword, when people may not search for primary care provider in that specific way every time. It might be family doctor near me, or where is my nearest family practitioner. So it's actually, if you are going to focus on tracking rankings, sometimes it's best to do so across a wide variety of similar keywords and kind of looking at those rankings as a whole and as a group. That can kind of give you a sense of where you're at as far as kind of your whole service line. But again, as far as proving success for your organization, I do like to also tie in those lower funnel metrics as well.
So you guys are doing great. Very proud of all of you. I did just want to mention, I think we're about 10 minutes out from the hour. So if anyone out there has questions that we haven't addressed yet, feel free to put those into the questions box and GoToWebinar. We'll kind of play a little priority game and give any of the live viewers priority. We do have about, I think there were 5 or 6 more questions that were submitted ahead of time that we can cover in the meantime if nobody else has questions, but I did just want to throw that out there before the time gets away from us. So we will keep moving on.
All right. So as Lindsay mentioned the funnel before and targeting there, speaking of funnels, with limited time, is it better to create new sources of organic traffic or improve the conversion funnel for high traffic content? So whether your time's limited or not, my answer to this is probably going to be the same. I think focusing on those conversion funnels and removing as many constraints as possible. I won't say removing all constraints, because the second you remove one, another one's going to pop up. But getting that funnel as fine-tuned as possible should always be the priority. It doesn't matter if you throw 1,000 or 1,000,000 people into it. If they get to step 3 of your funnel and fall out, the sheer volume becomes irrelevant. So I would focus always on getting those funnels working well and getting that conversion rate up. And then as you get that conversion rate up to a point where you think it's successful and you're happy with it, which I guess should probably be 100%, then start focusing on getting more traffic into that. So I think it kind of goes back to the same dinner party thing. Make sure the house is ready to have people over before you start bringing a bunch of people over.
Great.
So we're going to kind of put you guys on the spot here. Someone submitted a question and is wondering, how good are you at thinking on your feet? They are wondering, is there a good word to replace multidisciplinary?
No. Well, not that I can think of off the top of my head, but
I'd recommend doing some keyword research around that.
I'm pulling up thesaurus.com.
yes, synonyms.
One of the tools when you're looking at stuff like that, because we run into it with should we use immediate care, urgent care, walk-in clinic, things like that. Google Trends lets you go down to like your specific area, put in 2 different search terms, and they'll show you the people in your area what they're more prone to use. So if you have multidisciplinary and a couple other synonyms in mind, run them through that and then let the data show you. I'm a big fan of data-driven decisions, so take the guesswork out of it and let the people decide for you. And if it turns out that multidisciplinary is the preferred way to reference, multidisciplinary things, then leave it be. No need to fix what's not broken.
We had another question that someone was wondering about. Is it good practice to include the city a service is in the HTML title? So, for example, service line in Kansas City, and then the name of your hospital.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the way you read it's pretty much the formula I would use.
Yeah. Google wants to know where you're located so that it can serve relevant results to those local users. So if you aren't indicating where your services are offered geographically, you're less likely to rank in those specific geographic regions for people searching there.
On the flip side of that, if you do have a page where you're just talking about a service line and you're not actually offering any sort of treatment or service, basically there is no location tied to that page, don't force one. Just don't have one there.
And if you're struggling with the length of your page title, you can always use pipes as opposed to the word in.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. All right. Is there any SEO advantage to how you display a phone number? Short answer is no, there really isn't an SEO advantage, but some things to keep in mind are user experience, how users are kind of used to seeing phone numbers. And there can be some accessibility implications if you try to be creative or wonky with your phone numbers. So sometimes using the periods, depending on what device someone may be using from an accessibility standpoint, it could be read, 123, 456, so on and so forth. So it's safer to stick with how we're used to seeing phone numbers. And Google does have a recommended format, which uses the parentheses for the area code, which is how they structure their numbers on Google My Business. So. Yeah.
How do you measure success for undertaking a website improvement project to correct spelling mistakes, broken links, and on-page SEO? So this question gets dramatically more important as it goes through. So things like spelling mistakes, I would definitely go through and correct those, if for nothing else, just to make sure that users view you as competent. And then as Google really cracks down on the EAT stuff, which is expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, things like that will likely contribute. So I would fix those, but you're probably not going to see the needle move at all. That's just a user experience kind of thing. The broken links and linking, so linking across your own site internally, I think is still massively underrated. There's tons of data out there that show huge increases in traffic and conversions and all those important metrics just based on adding some in-links and cross-linking across the site. So I would say fixing those broken links should always be a priority. If one, for the user experience, you don't want to send people to a 404 page, but two, because of just the SEO benefit they offer. That should be really evident. So find out where that broken link was, and then the page it was supposed to lead to, and then just measure that bridge after you fix it, and start seeing the traffic flow through. So that is measurable, and you can really gauge that pretty easily. On-page SEO is really similar. So whatever page that you're doing efforts on, so this might be where tracking those keywords can be a handy metric to see if you've increased, going from not ranking for something specific to ranking for it, or going from the 10th page to the first page. That might help kind of prove the success of those initiatives as part of proving it. But other than that, you can just look at volume of traffic to those pages, organic, namely, if it's SEO. You can look at those funnels that you have set up on that page, your CTA. I think more important than getting the volume of traffic is getting high quality traffic. So less of the number of page views went up and the number of users went up. Moreover, the conversion rate went up or the bounce rate went down. Like pretty much anything that has the word rate in it, measure the fluctuations in those.
I like to use Google Search Console specifically to look at initial on-page SEO efforts. Usually the first thing I'll see is an immediate increase in impressions, and then that should be shortly followed by an increase in clicks to your site. If you see an increase in impressions but not necessarily clicks, then you know that maybe you're ranking for more keywords, but you're not yet driving traffic, so you want to make further updates to help get that increase of traffic. And then if you are tracking things on your actual page, like phone number clicks or downloads, I like to report on that as well, just to show that we're sending new traffic to this page for a reason.
We got 3 more. Should we try to go through?
Yep. Yeah. Let's do it fast.
Okay, so how can SEO strategies differ in the service industry as opposed to the retail industry? And actually, more and more healthcare patients are not that different from your retail consumers. So I really see more similarities here than differences. With more of their own dollars at risk, consumers are like way more careful in terms about making their healthcare choices. They evaluate things like cost, access, quality, just like they do when they're deciding on retail purchases as well. So this actually has the potential to impact about 61% of all healthcare spending. So good to kind of see where these things can match up and address those concerns appropriately. The patient journey in general is pretty similar to retail. So people kind of are in a moment where they're needing healthcare. They do their research, they book their appointment, kind of similar to selecting a store or vendor. They receive their care or they make their purchase. And then they're looking for aftercare, so that kind of post-care experience, or they're, in retail terms, they're using the product. So from healthcare, I think it's important to reach users at each one of those stages, or micro moments, as I think Google would probably like to call them. So not only when they're in the need and research phase, but kind of during all of those points during their journey. And I think that probably the best strategy to target those micro moments is optimizing for local search. So 63% of local searchers are actually people that are undecided on a provider, and about a third of the mobile searches are related to a location. So I think that those are 2 really strong areas to kind of capture those users in different need stages.
Yeah.
All right. Around the beginning of May, Google dropped hundreds of pages out of the index. What changed? So things constantly change within Google. Google says that their algorithm updates once every 9 minutes. I think it's a lot faster than that, but that just goes to show that their algorithm is updating constantly. So that means that things can come in and out of the rankings or show or not show. They're moving towards that page diversity where every domain, which includes subdomains, can only have 1 page show for a query. So if you have a lot of pages showing up that are kind of related to a query, that's going to go away. So that thing's always happening. But I think what this is mostly referring to is actually a bug back in May. Google Search Console and Google had a glitch in the mainframe and a lot of stuff disappeared, but really soon after it came back. So I'd be curious for whomever asked this question, if they've checked back since then and seen that things have come back. They made a lot of updates in June to try to prevent that from happening again. But when they do these big core updates, things like that can't happen. Usually if there's a huge dramatic shift, the one thing to keep in mind is when Google does these algorithm changes, you're not going to see like a giant shift immediately, at least not very often. The Medic update did it too. And when you do see something really dramatic, like overnight, chances are it's a bug on their end, or the algorithm update didn't go the way they wanted it to, and they're going to go back and fix that, like they did with the Medic update last year. They did with this bug in May. So just hang tight for a couple of days and see if it comes back. But I'm guessing the pages you're talking about here are back now.
Final question.
Last question.
Yeah.
What changes or trends do you see for the next 1 to 3 years for healthcare SEO? What should we be preparing for now? I think we all probably have different things that we focus on or say, but I think one big thing is that user intent. It's such a buzzword now, and we've kind of reiterated that, writing user-focused content, thinking of the search engine versus an answer engine. It's kind of the shift is what we're seeing for Google, especially. They're really trying to answer the user's questions or intent on their search engine results page. So with those no-click searches increasing, I think it's even more important to optimize your SEO to answer those users' questions so that you have the opportunity to be pulled into those knowledge panels or featured snippets and meet that search intent right on the search engine.
And because of that, I really think that investing time and dollars into Google My Business is going to be more and more important. Unfortunately, we're seeing that Google My Business might get a lot more competitive. There's a lot of signs that, excuse me, it might become more of a pay-to-play kind of platform. Google's been sending surveys to users about, would you pay for these certain features? So it's going to be more important, but unfortunately, it might become more costly as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think accessibility is going to be really huge as well. We're actually talking about this in next month in our webinar. But we're seeing more and more lawsuits pop up. And I think when it comes to accessibility, so even just from a legal standpoint, making sure your site is accessible is going to be super important. But then also from an SEO standpoint, an accessible site is actually great for SEO. So those clear, concise page titles, alt text for your images, structured pages, all of those things come into play with screen readers and other accessibility issues, but also is really, really helpful for SEO.
I also think all of those things are really important. I think AI, which kind of encompasses a lot of what they were talking about. So I took kind of the easy way out with my answer. AI is growing a lot in the world in general, just getting bigger all across industries. But I think it's really taking hold right now with SEO. So you might refer to it as machine learning or the way Google's algorithms go. I was at a conference with somebody from Google who said that their machine learning has gotten so evolved that there aren't humans at Google who actually know what every algorithm update pertains to. So there's little tweaks being done constantly on Google's end, and there's not a real person that knows what just happened. The machine did it by itself. So maybe Terminator's coming, maybe SEO gets easier. I like to think that it's the latter, and it just makes SEO easier. But yeah, I think AI is going to be huge. Google is going to know what you're going to search before you're done searching, before you start searching, and we're going to have to be able to optimize for the search before the search.